Hello, Pastor Keith Hodges. I want to welcome you today to our 3-minute leadership broadcast. And today we're going to do part 2 of overcoming the impossible. Let me just revisit our main thought. We said the impossible is not impossible. It just hasn't been done yet, right? The impossible is not impossible. It just hasn't been done yet. Luke 1:37, Jesus said, "For with God nothing will be impossible." The impossible is not impossible. Let me just carry that thought a little further. We said that you can do the impossible, right? There are things that you have deemed impossible, things that you have thought, man, we just can't do that. That's just impossible. We can't cross that barrier. We can't overcome that challenge. I want you to understand you can do the impossible if you will take your thoughts captive and make them obedient to Christ. And we talked about the positive side of that we have to take those thoughts, those God thoughts and God's ideas, because those thoughts and ideas that come from God are the keys to overcoming the impossible. So I want to give you 4 real practical things on how to take those thoughts captive, unlock the impossible, and step in to the next dimension that God has for you. So here it is. Number 1, you have to take the thought captive. What do I mean by it? Just simply write it down. You got to clarify that thought. So the first step to taking that thought captive and making it obedient is you just simply got to write it down. This is what God said. This is what I thought. This is the idea I believe that God gave me. The second thing is you have to create a plan to implement the thought. It's called a strategy, right? You got to create a plan. So here's the thought, here's the idea, now here's the plan. Here's the strategy of how we're going to implement this thing in our church, in our ministry, on our team. And the third thing is then once you create the plan, you now have to implement the plan, right? So you're going to create a plan. Here's my strategy. Now we're going to implement the plan. We're going to create a process. We're going to make a structure through which this thing is going to function and flow. This is how we're going to do it. So here's the thought. We wrote it down. We captivated that thought. Here's the plan, right? We created a strategy. Now here's the process. This is how we're going to implement this thing. And now here's the last part, because this is really where most of us as leaders get stuck. You have to stay committed to the process. You have to stay committed to the process, because many times we get distracted by the next thought. And what happens is we don't ever follow completely through. We never make that thought obedient to Christ. We begin a process, we create a strategy, we implement a plan, but we never follow through. We never stay committed to the process long enough to see the impossible made possible. I heard a statement made by a gentleman. He said this. He said, in order to do what God has called you to do, every true success requires what he called long obedience in the same direction. We have to have long obedience in the same direction. We've got to stay committed to the process long enough to see the impossible become possible. So I want to challenge you today. Understand the impossible's not impossible, right? Understand you can do the impossible if you're willing to take those thoughts captive, stay true to the process, and refuse to quit. God bless you today in Jesus' name.